The third season of a TV show is an incredibly important one because at this point in time, we as an audience and the creators of the show as well should know exactly what direction their show is going in and exactly what it wants to be. And for the longest time, I thought Solar Opposites had things figured out by season 2. I thought they knew exactly where they wanted to go, exactly what they wanted to be, but it's almost the polar opposite now after seeing Solar Opposites season 3. Because now I think this show has no idea where it's going, but it almost kind of works in the show's favor. This show is the biggest double-edged sword I've ever seen in any animated programming, because everything that makes it entertaining and unique is also what makes it uneven and unfocused. It's just a mess, but in the best way possible. And the clearest example of this is with its overabundance of plot lines. In the third season, we end with 3 separate characters having 3 separate cliffhangers in 3 separate environments, 3 separate worlds essentially, and 3 separate plot lines on top of that are completely different and barely connected, if you can even call it that. They have the loosest of connections to tie them all together. There's a plot line with the Solar Opposites family, there's a plot line with the Wall that everyone loves so much, and then there's a new plot line with these silver police officers. All of that being at the end of your series, that is overwhelming for an audience, or at least it was for me, because I now feel like this show has too many things for me to care about, when before it was kind of finding that balance between the dramatic stuff they were putting in with the Wall and the comedic stuff they were doing with the Solar Opposites family. Like, that kind of worked, but throwing in this third plot line now where we have entire episodes that just leave the Solar Opposites family behind, like, that's kind of insane to do as a TV show. But the episodes that pull away from Corvo and the alien family, those episodes are still pretty good. Like, they're entertaining. It's clear everyone working on this show is incredibly skilled at what they do, because even when the focus and the pacing and all these technical aspects that you would think make for a good TV show, when all of that is thrown out the window, they still find a way to make compelling characters. They still find a way to make compelling storylines that are interesting. They find ways to make you care despite you barely having any investment in these characters and only seeing them for a couple of episodes or maybe an hour at a time per season because you spend most of the time with the alien family. The show still finds a way to get you somewhat invested, but at this point in time, after season 3, I do feel like it's becoming too much. I think that there is too much content at this point in time in Solar Opposites for it to really have the focus it needs to reach the point where it's one of these great adult animated shows. Right now, it's just pretty good because there's too much to focus on. This was the first time while watching this show with all its crazy plot lines that I was actually starting to forget stuff because there was so much information being dumped on me at one time. There's plot lines with the Wall that are going through, and there's foreshadowing with that I wind up forgetting about because after that stuff happens, we go back to the alien family, and the alien family has a really intense episode, and then they have a really goofy episode, and then we're back to the Wall, and now the Wall is splitting its time with the police officers in space, and so now the Wall isn't getting the full focus it probably needs to develop. To the point where the ending of this season, with its 3 separate plot lines and its 3 separate cliffhangers, it just felt really undercooked and underwhelming because nothing got the time it needed to really develop into something interesting. And that's the biggest problem with this show. Its focus is spread too thin. Now, speaking of general stuff that you would expect from an adult animated series, and if you've seen Solar Opposites, the sense of humor is still pretty solid. I laughed multiple times while watching this show. I really did enjoy it from that perspective. My biggest complaint still, and I have a feeling this will always be a complaint I have, is overly referential humor in adult animated shows and fellow kids humor where they try to relate to younger audiences despite being like 50-year-olds and having no idea how younger audiences act or interact with one another. Those styles of humor will always annoy me. And the referential stuff this time around was incredibly annoying to me because there's a sequence where the alien family is talking about how like a movie, it's like a movie, the plot line they're going through, it's like this movie. And then one of the aliens goes, no, it's actually like this movie because of this. And then another alien goes, actually, it's like this movie because of this. And that's just kind of like a crutch to make up for unoriginality while at the same time not being funny. Because it's not funny to be like, oh yeah, I've seen that movie. I understand that reference. Maybe that makes some people feel smart, or there's some like dopamine release that I'm not getting from that, but I hate it. It feels like time wasting and it gives me a headache, and it happens so much in this show. And on top of that, the fellow kids humor where it tries to be really relatable, it has far less of that than I was expecting. Frankly, I thought they would kind of double down on it more in these next seasons, because season 2 had a fair bit of it that I wasn't a big fan of. But they kind of pulled back a good bit. There are moments where I was like, that's not quite there. But they also hit a few times and were able to get a little bit more connected. So clearly, they're putting more effort into that area and using that style of humor more sparingly. But they definitely overused the referential humor this time around. There's one point with the wall subplot where like the bad guy is talking about how he's going to do something like in Avengers Endgame. Remember Avengers Endgame? And then the other two characters are like, no, it's not like Avengers Endgame, or maybe I have it switched. I don't know. It's the dumbest exchange ever. It's super annoying. It kills the pace of the entire episode, and it's not funny. Saying something is like a movie or referencing a movie out of nowhere, and by referencing a movie, I mean, it's like this movie. That's the reference they're doing. Like, that's not funny. That's not interesting, and that does not take effort. And in the way that you're integrating it with the story, where you're taking plot points from movies, putting them in your show, and then saying, hey, wait, this is just like that movie. That's not funny. I can tell what you're doing. You stole a plot line from a movie because you wanted to do an episode parodying it, but you couldn't parody it very well, so you decided just to make fun of the fact that you aren't executing this story as well as the movie and aren't parodying it in a way that's original or funny. You're calling attention to how bad your version of the story is. That's incredibly stupid. It doesn't play for laughs, at least for me. I'm sure there are some people out there that see this overly referential humor and are like, I have seen Avengers Endgame. I have seen Cuisine. I have seen Chef. And that makes them laugh. It does not make me laugh. It's the dumbest thing ever, and I hate it, and I wish it would stop showing up in shows, because it's just terrible. That's what ruined that show Inside Job for me. It was just so heavily referential. If you didn't see the Joe Rogan podcast, if you didn't know who Joe Rogan was when you were watching Inside Job, that show completely falls flat. And there's a similar, not quite as drastic situation with Solar Opposites, where it's just reference after reference, movie reference, app reference, restaurant reference. I don't care. It's not funny. It's the worst part of the show. So between these focus issues, between the double-edged sword of this show's best aspects being how chaotic it is, and also its worst aspects being how chaotic it is, I can still say I enjoyed it, but less so than other seasons, and I'm honestly weary for what comes next, because I think that there's just too much going on, and it's becoming harder and harder for me to get invested in this show, and it's clear that it's becoming harder for other people to become invested in this show, because I don't really hear people talking about this show at all in like the space of adult animation or just animation in general. People aren't really clamoring about this show after its first 2 seasons, because those first 2 seasons with that wall subplot, it was crazy. It's Rick and Morty without like the emotional stakes. It's just a complete mess at this point, and I'm worried that the audience is going to wind up pulling out and leaving. They're going to be focusing on too many different things, and the entire show is just going to fall apart. And the last thing I'll say about this show, the one constructive thing I have to say about it, is with all these different plot lines, with all these crazy things going on, the one way you could fix this is by sending the Solar Opposites family out on adventures where they, run into some of these dramatic plot lines and they get sucked up into them, and comedy comes out of that. You know, like you put the Solar Opposite characters into one of these dystopian worlds, or you put them with the silver police officers or whatever. You integrate them into the storyline. Except the problem is, if you do that, this show basically just becomes Rick and Morty with a family. And it's pretty clear that the people working on it don't want it to be heavily connected to that show. It's okay to have like a similar art style and sense of humor, but it can't be like the same type of storytelling, which I completely understand, but that is what would fix this chaotic issue. that kind of setup. And it begs the question, why not just watch Rick and Morty instead? Because that show has the formula, has the setup to execute those sort of storylines while integrating the entire family dynamic of, you know, the show. It's able to integrate I can't even remember the name of the Rick and Morty family now. Morty's family. What are they? The Smiths? Morty Smith? Yeah, the Smith family. Jesus, it's been a little while since I've watched Rick and Morty. The Smith family, like, they're fully integrated in the story from episode to episode. In Solar Opposites, the family is actively taken out of the series to focus on different characters and different plot lines because they don't work in them. Or because if they did work in them, it would just be like Rick and Morty again. So that's the main gripe I have with this show, is that why not just watch Rick and Morty is really my thing at this point in time. There's stuff to enjoy in this. I do still kind of recommend this show, especially the first 2 seasons, but it's becoming more difficult for me right now. If I had to give this season a score out of 10, it's probably close to a 7 for me, a 6 or 7. I'm going to land on 6 right now, just from how unfocused it was, that annoying referential humor, how burnt out I got at like episode 8 or 9 with just all these different storylines and all these different referential jokes and all these things going on. It was just too much at a point. So 6 out of 10 is where I'm sitting right now. I still do kind of recommend it. We'll see how season 4 goes, because I'm almost certain this show is getting a season 4. And that's about all I have to say on the matter. It is not working right now, and it makes me as an audience member think, why don't I just watch Rick and Morty, which is a show that's doing the same kind of thing, except it's all just one plot line, and it's all just one set of characters, and I can really get involved and engrossed in those characters, whereas in Solar Opposites, they literally pull characters away from episode to episode to make different storylines work. That's where I'll leave it for right now. 6 out of 10. Thank you very much for watching this video. Let me know what you thought of the season down in the comment section below. And if you think any of the points I made here are completely insane, or if you're with them, I'd love to hear it. Like and subscribe to become a cow, and I will see you all next time. Goodbye.